Hello, and welcome back on your mathematical journey. So, I wanted to go over some broad test taking tips, words of wisdom that I would share with anybody looking to improve how they perform on math tests. This comes from many years of taking tests of all kinds, whether they be standardized tests or tests during my time in Stanford or other tests that I've taken along the way. And I would say that these are sort of the main takeaways I would like to um, pass along. So, the first one here that I've highlighted is understanding the point breakdown of the test. And so, what I mean by that is, right, if you could find out how many points, right, the test is out of, if you can understand some tests, right, they will explicitly tell you that, each question is worth a certain amount of points. On some tests, that's a fixed amount. On other tests, you'll have one question that's worth 3 points and another question that's worth 15 points. So just be mindful of that and sort of in accordance with that, use that point breakdown as a time management tool of sorts. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're on a test where the first question is only worth 1 point out of 25, and let's say you have 50 minutes to complete the test, right? If you're stuck on that question for, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes, you're sort of doing yourself a disservice because the test is probably roughly designed, if it's 25 points and 50 minutes, to be sort of a rough pace of 1 point every 2 minutes. And so you want to sort of pace yourself to make sure that you have time to at least read all of the questions on the test, if not get a chance to answer all of them. It's very frustrating to run out of time and realize that there were questions that you didn't have the time to get to because you spent too much time on an earlier question. So that's the other reason to understand the point breakdown. The next point I wanted to mention is to read the question carefully. In particular, note what they are ultimately looking for. What is the desired quantity? Since I'll be sort of talking in a math sense, right? Let's say you have a question where it involves the age of two people named Alice and Bob, right? Well, some tests might be asking for what is Alice's age. Some tests might be asking for what is Bob's age. Many tests will ask what is Alice's age and what is Bob's age. Some tests will ask what is the sum of their ages, right? And so on and so forth. So there's any number of things that they can ask for on a test. And so just be careful just to read it and make sure that you didn't have to perform one little extra operation at the end to adjust your answer. It's very frustrating to do almost all the work correctly, only to find out that because you missed one little tweak in the directions of the question, that you weren't able to receive full credit. Or in some cases, not any credit if it's on some tests. The third point I want to say is to show your work. Now, this definitely matters on tests where a teacher might be more inclined to give you partial credit. Unfortunately, there are some tests you will take in life where you won't get any credit for having some correct steps along the way without the correct final answer. But even in those cases, showing your work makes it much easier to go back and check your answer. It's much tougher to find a computational error, especially on a longer problem, if you don't sort of show your work and make it easy to look back through each step along the process. And then there are plenty of tests in life where you will receive some amount of points for showing your work and having correct steps along the way, even if you do ultimately trip up computationally. That's something that becomes much more common the further along you get in math, as sort of each question becomes more and more involved and there's more steps for each individual question. But absolutely. And then the only additional note on that is make sure to circle your final answer. Teachers don't really like it. Teachers and graders don't like it when you sort of put multiple answers, sort of trying to fish for the right for the credit for the right answer. Make sure to clearly indicate what is sort of the end result of your work. And then the last point I want to stress is a point that my Algebra 2 teacher used to needle me about all the time, which is be careful with negative numbers. I would say in my personal experience, computations involving negative numbers probably multiply your chances of making a mistake probably by a factor of somewhere between 5 and 10 times as likely. I know that sounds kind of drastic, but that's just a rough ballpark. That's not a definitive. I don't think there's any scientific research sort of exactly quantifying that rate of making a computational mistake when negative numbers are involved. But negative numbers can definitely trip up almost anyone doing math, whether it's somebody just getting started in math or somebody who's been doing math their entire lives. So always be careful on problems. If you can ever avoid having to work with negative numbers on a problem, I strongly suggest you do so. It just makes it that much easier for you to avoid making silly computational mistakes that are the bane of math students and mathematicians everywhere. Anyway, I hope that helps. Those are kind of my main takeaways that I like to pass along. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post those. Otherwise, have a good day and happy mathing.